Hello, welcome back. This is Dad Chats 2, episode 11 today. And it's quite a special episode because today I'm talking to Colette Marshall, who is the CEO of Diabetes UK. And there she is. Good morning, Colette. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Paul. We're just saying how cold and wet it is this morning. I hope listeners are there in the sunshine, but it definitely isn't like that now, is it?
Yes, we've. I mean, maybe when this comes out, we'll get some more sun. Yeah, it's not sort of begun yet, has it? In England, it's kind of dark and a little bit of sunshine over the weekend, and back we are to our usual wet, windy, cold weather.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. I know you must have a busy schedule. So to begin, as we usually do on these podcasts, we'll find out a little bit about you, and then we'll delve into Diabetes UK and the work you do there. So before Diabetes UK, where were you? What were you doing?
I started off my career as a research scientist, actually, up in Darwin in Lancashire, which was incredible, working on a chemical plant, doing research and seeing product go out of the gates, which was really exciting. I worked for ICI, for those of you that are old enough to remember who ICI was, but key part of the chemicals industry here in the UK. But I also found myself doing, like many people, bit of volunteering, bit of giving money to charity. And I was just really inspired by what charities can do in terms of changing people's lives. So I made a shift and worked for Save the Children, working particularly around the issues of severe and persistent poverty for children in the UK, which shockingly is still a really, really big issue. Worked then for some health charities and came to Diabetes UK 12 years ago now and have become totally hooked by the cause. I knew very little about diabetes when I started, like many people actually, but the more I found out and the more colleagues and friends and people's stories I heard, yeah, just felt like it was the cause.
Excellent. I didn't know you'd been there for 12 years, which sort of leads me into the next question of what inspired you to work within diabetes? Was there a sort of light bulb moment, or did you find just sort of accidentally find yourself in there?
I think I think a real sense of anger, actually, strangely enough, and just the injustice of it. That here is a number of conditions, type 1, type 2 diabetes, and a range of other conditions that are completely underfunded, under-resourced, and not just not taken seriously enough. Um, that if you look at other health conditions have rightly had that support and so much more knowledge, so many more breakthroughs. And type 1 diabetes, still insulin is the key therapy, which, 100 years later, it's amazing. Insulin was just a fabulous discovery. And so much has changed, and so many scientists and researchers have put so much in, but still massively under-resourced. And I thought, this is a condition that doesn't need rocket science. It needs some focus, it needs some funding, it needs taking seriously. And I think hearing the stories of people with diabetes just made that very powerfully to me.
That's lovely. That's fantastic. So you've been there for 12 years, and it must be last year, wasn't it, when you became the CEO? So it's quite new, I suppose. So how are you finding the position of being the boss, for want of a better term, so far?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's just a complete privilege and honor to be doing this role. I feel so very, very grateful for it. Also, huge responsibility. As I've said, conditions of diabetes type 1, type 2, and others, so much needs to be done. Um, but what fabulous community. And people talk about the diabetes family, which is people with diabetes, but also the scientists, the researchers, the healthcare professionals, the supporters, the incredible donors. It's an amazing family community feel. So yeah, just amazing place to work.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. Any unusual challenges so far? I mean, you're when did you begin? It's not even 12 months yet, is it?
No, it's I'm just in my seventh month. Gosh, what have been the most challenging ones? Oh, you get everything from can we have Portaloos for the fundraising event in Glasgow? That one came across the desk the other day, through to at the other end of the spectrum, the really exciting Grand Challenge, Steve and Sally Morgan's £50 million generous gift to diabetes, type 1 diabetes research, but also their bravery and courage at really wanting it to be disruptive and leading edge research. So it's a really interesting mix. You never know what's going to happen from one day to the next.
Yeah, yeah. That was partly my next question was the Steve Morgan Foundation, who, if people don't know, donated, was it £50 million about 2 years ago? So
Yes,
in the last, yeah, so it was about that time, wasn't it? About 2 years. So in the last 2 years, any exciting news, any developments on that side of things, or are we? Is it too soon?
it's too soon for results, but we've been working in partnership with JDRF on this, and between the two organisations have now invested, with the agreement of the Morgans and with the scientific panel, 20 million of that. So it was really exciting. Last year's DUK PCR Diabetes UK Professional Conference, we had the first research groups there and present. And then this year we had a whole room just full of the researchers all meeting for the first time across different groups. So that's incredible. And sort of three major areas of research underway now. So firstly, JDRF leading around novel insulins. So this will be around how can you get faster responding insulins that will both help the development of further generations of technology, but also potentially lead to some more support for people living with diabetes in terms of just making things a little easier. The second one is looking at how can we protect the beta cells or grow new ones, which is a really exciting area of work. And then the third area is sort of root causes. What is actually causing that attack of the beta cells in the first place? You can see that islet cells apparently try and put up some defense. So there's research there to see if you can strengthen that defense mechanism. And then underneath that, those are the sort of the three overarching areas of exciting research. But there's also the work to build the infrastructure, because you need the research and the cutting edge breakthroughs, but then you need to translate that into practice. So we're also using some of the money to make sure that if something comes out, or when something comes out in the future, then there is the infrastructure in the UK to make the best use of it. So one of those pieces of infrastructure we're calling the Foundry, which I love the name, but it's basically how can we have beta cell production much closer to the UK, either in the UK itself or nearby. At the moment, there's beta cell production over in the US, but the cells don't like to travel so far. So once you've got a stream of beta cells, that not only will support the Grand Challenge research, but it will also stimulate other new research around beta cells, which will be really exciting. And then the final area is how do you get a clinical network? I mean, some of that sounds like sort of the administrative side, but it isn't. It's actually how do you bring the best minds together, and how do you embed it within the research institutions in the UK, so that as discoveries are found, hopefully there's a home for them and there's a way in which that translation into practice can happen. So it's an incredible piece of work, and I think a huge thanks needs to go out to people with diabetes who've helped steer that and given their views as to what the priorities have been, to the scientists and researchers and healthcare professionals who freely give their time and advice. Professor Simon Heller is the chair of the scientific advisory group, and they give so much free time to all of this. And then obviously to Steve and Sally Morgan. I mean, it's just such a breathtaking piece of generosity. So yeah, incredible to sort of see this playing out, be a very small part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, and I can just think back to a couple of years ago. It was such big TV headline news and so exciting for somebody like me who lives with type 1 diabetes to have that potential of, wow, actually, I didn't know it was a question of just finance that could push us on to potentially finding a cure or get us just closer to a cure. And we've got all the technology in the UK at the moment, and good insulins, and compared to some nations, we're doing quite well. But ultimately, I think we can do a lot better by having a cure. And one day we might get there. That would be fantastic. And if it's the Steve Morgan Foundation that put the first step on the ladder, then thank you so much. I'm sure that people have got lots of hopes for that to happen, and hopefully we'll see more news in the coming years, and maybe we'll get a bit closer to that. So just speaking of donations, because I guess that must be one of the largest, if not the largest, donation. In terms of organizations, businesses, and commercial donations, does that add a lot to Diabetes UK's finances these days, or is it still a question of individuals that help out?
Really good question, Paul. And actually, I might just close off the Grand Challenge question by just saying there's a microsite for the Grand Challenge. So if anybody's interested in actually, as you were saying, following the story, it's regularly updated. So if you're really interested in the Grand Challenge research, there's a microsite for it. So in terms of our funding, I think some people think we get government funding and we get hardly any at all. So most of our funding comes from people with or affected by diabetes who really believe in the cause. Majority of the funding comes through legacies. So people who very kindly want to make a difference for people after they've gone. I just such a generous thing to do, isn't it? Which is to leave the world, but know that you're leaving behind some hope for others in the future. It's just incredible set of gifts, those. And then we have members who give, we have individual donors who give, and then we have some partnerships as well. So it's a mix of funding streams that supports our work.
Excellent. So a multifaceted thing. Just as Colette mentioned there, I'm going to put a few links down below. So all the subjects that we talk about today, if you want to know more, they'll be below. Just check them out below the video. Do some clicking. Take a look. So we've covered the Steve Morgan Foundation there, and we've covered the donations of organisations and individuals. Earlier this year, there was somewhat of a kerfuffle, to say the least, about a partnership with Diabetes UK and Slimming World. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, first of all, just want to say a big thank you to the number of people that came and engaged with us on that. We had a lot of feedback and we had a lot of people come to us and have really helpful, constructive conversations. And just want to say thank you because people took their time to talk to us about their feelings about the partnership and their views on it, which was really helpful. I think the second one I want to say is apologies about the way we launched it. I mean, we launched it in the middle of Eating Disorders Week, which was, to be honest, that was just not helpful at all. And so, to those people, we know that caused hurt and just really sorry for the hurt we caused on that. So we've been looking at the challenges that people with diabetes have in terms of finding weight management services that actually are respectful of people with diabetes and also understand diabetes. And we did some research with people with diabetes about 2 years ago, mostly people with type 2 diabetes, but some with type 1 who said, they couldn't, access was really hard. Secondly, that they found that the weight management services, people didn't really understand diabetes. And thirdly, and maybe we'll talk about this a bit later, Paul, but the sort of stigma around it as well. And that some people, when asked what was the thing they really wanted most, was respect. They want ideally a great service, but if they couldn't have a great service, they'd at least like to be treated as a human being and with respect and the stigma taken away. So we've been looking at how to take some action in that space, realizing it's also a very sensitive space for people as well because of the stigmas around weight, around diabetes, around sugar. All of this are in and around diabetes. So we were talking to Slimming World, and they provide community-based weight management services, and they are often prescribed by the NHS. So doctors, at least in England, can then signpost or refer some of their patients to their services. And Slimming World were really keen to make their services more diabetes friendly, particularly around type 2, understand the issues around type 1 diabetes, and try and tailor their support more. So we saw this as an opportunity where we could help them provide a better service, and that seemed to be a really important for people with diabetes.
Thank you for that explanation. Just one other small thing on that subject. So the community engagement, which you thanked the community for that at the time, would that be something to take on board in future when Diabetes UK work on partnerships?
So one of the things that we should have done was we should have talked to our lived experience advisory group. Our lived experience advisory group meet about quarterly, and we always have a big list, bless them. We always have a massive list for their agendas. And I think we've said, there was a lot on and this didn't get there and that was a mistake and we should absolutely have done that. And I think, and most of all for those people on those groups, because I think therefore they felt like that this happened and they didn't know about it, which is an awful position for them to have been in. So, my biggest apologies go to them because that was an awful position for them to be in. So we have a very robust way of assessing our partnerships. We have to. We're a charity and we want to make sure that people that have generously given their money to us and who support us and our stakeholders, that we do the right partnerships. So we have a process for assessing all the partnerships, and we've now got a link in with our involvement team to make sure they see every partnership going through. They won't take everyone to the lived experience advisory group because we've got to be respectful of their time, but they will flag the ones that they think most need to go there.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Colette. I know that's somewhat of a heated discussion, not between you and I, but over social media channels over the last few months, and maybe that's calmed a little now. So hopefully, people that have watched this video will get a better understanding of what's going on there, and that you have taken things on board at Diabetes UK. You have listened to the community. So you also spoke about stigma there, which is another huge subject within diabetes, and I'm sure we could talk about that for hours on end today. But let's just focus on that for maybe a minute or two. What are Diabetes UK doing about diabetes and stigma at the moment?
So we first heard this from people with diabetes. It must be about 5-6 years ago when we did. For those of you who can remember, we did a big piece of research asking people about the future of diabetes and talked to about 9,000 people with diabetes. And interestingly, at that time, it didn't come out as sort of one of the top topics that people talked about. It came out after when we did our sort of market, sort of more focused interviews. After about 20-30 minutes, we started to get a sense that there was something here we'd not heard before. So we've done more research and had more conversations since. We've obviously been looking across the world as well. Diabetes Australia has been doing some work in the stigma space. And I think the first one to say is it isn't stigma, it's stigmas. There's a whole set of myths and judgments that are made of people with type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and other forms of diabetes. Some of that's around, weight and overweight and the stigmas around that. Some of it's around tech and how people feel about having visible tech. Some of it's around injecting in public and how that's perceived. And some of it's about the othering, about people with diabetes saying they feel othered and made to feel different because of their condition and excluded from activities, particularly children and young people. So it's a cluster of stigmas. And I think we're exploring and want to explore further with people with diabetes how to work in this space, because it's such a sensitive one in terms of us and others getting the language right and also making change happen. And we see the damage in a number of ways. We see that individuals are hurt by stigmas, by some of the attitudes and views. We see that people spend a lot of their life having to it's hard enough living with diabetes 24/7 without having to have the additional burden of educating people around you, fighting the corner, the mental load of always explaining your condition and living with that judgment. We've got the institutional stigma in that a lot of these beliefs are ingrained around society. So we know, for instance, that a lot of these views are believed by people themselves. So if you ask people with diabetes about does sugar cause diabetes, there's a significant portion of people who believe that. They also think if they have overweight, that it's their fault and they should be blamed for it, and they feel guilt and shame. So these beliefs are held by people with diabetes as well as society, which makes it doubly hard to live with. And then finally, we think it underpins the fact that diabetes as a cause is under-resourced and underfunded. So, yeah, if we look at other conditions, and I wouldn't take a penny away from them in terms of the funding, but the scale of investment in different health conditions is massively different. And the number of people that want to make their career in diabetes, either as researchers, scientists, or healthcare professionals, again, it's not seen as one of the key exciting areas. And yet when you look at what's going to happen over the next 20 years, if we can bring that energy and resource together, we could see some major breakthroughs. So we see stigma as impacting people on all those different levels, personal, institutional, but also in terms of the cause. So it's not going to be a short piece of work. We're thinking that this is at least 10, 15 years worth of programme. We're sort of doing our first major year this year first, and we're just about to go out to people with diabetes this week and say, would anybody join us on our panel to give us advice, and to co-create this work, because it has to be done alongside people with diabetes and the widest possible community.
Fabulous. So you will get the involvement of the community there. Do you believe that funding will help when it comes to, I mean, you mentioned stigmas. It isn't just stigma, and you mentioned many stigmas there, and there's absolutely lots of them, of course. Do you
Yeah,
think additional funding would help, and that could lower the incidence of stigma within things like the media? Only the other day, I think we saw a newspaper piece. I won't mention the newspaper. It mentioned something about diabetes doctors
I
based
know.
upon a menu. You may have seen that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you did. So would that help to educate journalists and the media to be careful about their language and the images that they use?
Absolutely. Diabetes UK already spends a lot of time trying to educate the media. We have briefing documents for journalists. We try and pick up as many of those stories and go back and say, really, it's done unwittingly. We don't think it's done maliciously at all, but it doesn't help, and it just adds to the stigma. So we think there are a number of audiences we will need to work with over the coming years. This year, we're really focusing on our warm audiences. So we're reaching out to people with diabetes. We've talked to healthcare professionals and researchers at the Diabetes UK Professional Conference. We're doing articles about it in Balance, which is our members magazine, but also in Update, which is the magazine we send out to our healthcare professional members as well. And we're doing more market research in the area as well to get a better understanding of what's going on. Later on this year, we're thinking it will be around World Diabetes Day, but there may be an election then as well, so we need to pick our moment. We'll be going out to people with diabetes saying, would you mind sharing your testimonies of the stigmas you've experienced? Because we want to engage with people, we want to hear stories, we want to make sure that people's views are driving our work, but we also want to start building the stories so that we can show the damage and the impact that that it has. Then we think, and again, this is something we'll want to test with people with diabetes, but our first sense of our next key audiences are family and friends. People with diabetes so far have said, actually, it's the people closest to them that can be the most, totally not meaning to, but can sometimes make the comments that hurt most. So how can we support people with diabetes and their families and friends? We also want to look at healthcare professionals. Again, absolutely amazing people who are trying to do very difficult jobs at the moment, because they're in a society that believes some of these views, they sometimes share them. And how can we support them in not, again, unwittingly causing harm? And then the third area is, how do we make sure that policymakers and the people that are making the decisions at senior levels in the health service, but also across society, understand diabetes much better? So again, don't hold those stigmas. So we've got a range of audiences, and media is definitely part of that, and longer term public opinion. And as you say, that is going to need some significant funding. You can do the early stage stuff. We're going to be investing some of charitable spend in this space, but we'll be going out for some big funding calls to donors later on, because once you get into public opinion campaigning, that starts to be quite expensive. But we think it's really vital work.
Yeah, me too. As you said, it will take a while, and you mentioned
It
maybe 10
will.
years before we could see any changes there. But yeah, certainly worthwhile investing time and money into that. Absolutely. And I speak as somebody who lives with diabetes. So I think because we're getting towards the end here, let's talk about one more thing. And it may be a subject that hasn't come up that often, but maybe it does in your circles. I don't know. A few people have asked me to ask one specific thing of you, and it sort of ties into our last question a little bit. And that involves the services that Diabetes UK could offer to, first of all, people that live with type 1 diabetes, but also people who are like me, who are over the age of 40. And we feel a little bit left out. And I don't know a way of wording that any better. We feel a little bit last in the queue when it comes to access to tech and support. So how does Diabetes UK help? First of all, people like me, but also people with type 1 on the whole.
So we have a range of services, Paul, and places that people can get help and support. And we're always interested if people want to come back and say, but what about this? Because this is what feels most relevant now. So do please feed in ideas. So first of all, in terms of helpline, I think is the place I would first point people to. We have a helpline that is open between 9 and 6, 5 days a week. And they are there to provide information if people want it, but they're actually there as well to provide a listening ear. And, I'm lucky enough to hear some of the calls and people that phone in. It's everything from, I've got this issue and I don't know how to speak to my doctor about it, or I'm not getting this response. How can you help me when I next go in, have the conversation, through to people phoning up saying, I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 50 odd years and I'm tired and I'm just fed up and I just want to talk to somebody. And it's a mixture of those sorts of calls. The other thing the helpline can always do is can always signpost either within the Diabetes UK if we've got resources or support we can offer, but can also signpost to other organisations. We keep connected with lots of other charities and organisations. So they're a real great hub to go to. In terms of other information and support, if you look at our website, we have everything from masses of information. There is loads on there, and sometimes finding it can be a challenge, but we try and set it up. So if you've got type 1 diabetes, go into the type 1 diabetes page, and that will tend to give you the things that you might be more interested in. We have podcasts, and there's a really interesting podcast series. I don't want to be competitive with you at all, Paul, but there's some interesting ones with other people as well. So and with experts in the field. So see what people see there. You can also get information and updates on our research. That is particularly important for people over the age of 40 and anybody with type 1 diabetes. We have an e-newsletter, but we also have regular blogs about what's going on in the research area. We know people are fascinated by that. And then if you want to be a member, there's a quarterly Balance magazine that comes out and information around research for members if you're interested in that too. So that's a sort of information area. In terms of peer support, we have an online forum that was set up by an amazing set of volunteers, probably about 15, 16 years ago now, who were just very wise, very kind, and it's a very safe space. And it's got things from very serious stuff about living with diabetes and, advice from one person to the next, or, tips right the way through to they do wild and wacky, go off on holiday. They've got a whole set of pages of some fictional holiday destination where they all go off every single thing. So it's a mixture of fun and really warm, kind support. We've got local groups if people want to meet face to face. So if you want to meet face to face in your local community, stick your postcode into the postcode finder and it will tell you your sort of closest local group. So that's a key area for people. And then in terms of wellness, we've got lots of content about exercise. We know that for people with type 1 diabetes, that can be tough. So there is a sort of whole set of YouTube videos and others around that. We also have our Million Steps Challenge. We have wellness walks, so you can come together as part of the community and do those. So like I said, it's almost that sometimes there's just too much fighting your way through it all. We also obviously do the policy and advocacy work. So we talk regularly with DVLA. I know that's a big issue for adults working age and older with type 1 diabetes. We support and grow groups. We've got the Tech Can't Wait campaign that has obviously been so successful in England, in Scotland, just hoping that we get the budget from the Scotland government to fund the rollout of hybrid closed loop there. But again,
Yeah.
supporting people who want to be really active in this space. So those are a few of
Excellent.
areas. I hope that's helpful. And I think we're going to post a link, which again will give an overview of most of those. But do come back to us if you think we're missing something.
We absolutely will post the links. As I said a little earlier, lots of links down below. Anything that Colette's spoken about today, you should find some information there. Follow that up. Colette, the time has flown and we may get cut off in a moment. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing to talk to you. Thank you for talking to me about Diabetes UK and all those explanations, including one or two difficult subjects. Hello, it's me again. So the call with Colette was disconnected just at the end there, but thank you so much to Colette Marshall for joining me as my guest on episode 11 of Dad Chats 2. I hope you enjoyed that one. It's kind of a new, a sort of special type of podcast that I did there. So it's something that I may do again in future. I usually talk to people who live with diabetes. That was a conversation with a person who works within diabetes. So if you like that one, do hit that thumbs up, like button at the bottom, please. Leave a comment if you like, if you have something to ask Colette or ask me or just a view. So leave a comment down below. There's a notification bell. So if you like these sort of videos, tap that one and you won't miss a video in future. And you can always sub to the channel. And then, you can watch all the Dad Chats 2 videos with all the amazing people that live with diabetes whenever you wish. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will catch you next time. Bye for now.